Good morning, everybody. I am Pete Panito, First Northern Credit Union's Business Development Contact. We have First Northern's Zachary Taylor presenting today's webinar, Credit Card Makeover, Getting Out of Debt. This presentation is part of our monthly financial wellness program here at First Northern. We hope the holidays were a positive note to end a very challenging year, and we welcome in all positive energy for 2021. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat box. It comes straight to Zachary and myself directly, so please don't be shy. You also have the ability to raise your virtual hand during the session as well, and I will respond in the chat box. I will answer as many questions as I can during the presentation, and we will make sure we address them all if we miss any by the end and at the end of the presentation. We appreciate you joining us on this fine, rainy / snowy Saturday morning. And with that, I will turn this microphone over to Mr. Zachary Taylor. Zachary.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Pete. Again, we really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their morning to join us. This is wonderful. Credit card makeover. This topic is one that affects everyone, whether you have perfect spending habits or not. So I absolutely love talking about it. So with that being said, make sure you have your first, second, maybe even your third cup of coffee with you, and let's dive right into warning signs of credit card trouble. If any of these potential warning signs of credit trouble sound familiar to you, it may be time to change up your financial habits. So paying only the minimum amount due on your credit cards is one to look out for sure. Charging more each month than you make in payments, that's running up the debt. Using credit and cash advances for items that used to be purchased with cash, that's very tricky as that usually has a really high repayment, so be careful on that. Having a total credit balance that rarely decreases, that means you're either just making the minimum payments and interest is accelerating, and you're not making any progress on that, so keep an eye out for that one. Being at or near your credit limit and applying for new cards. So if you've run up a little bit of credit on your card and your solution is to open a new line of credit, that's definitely a warning sign to look out for. As far as that, needing a loan to pay existing debt, not knowing the total amount that you owe, that's very troublesome. You definitely want to know where you're standing on debt, whether it's good or bad. Experiencing feelings of anxiety and stress whenever you use your credit card. So if you know you have some trouble with credit cards, maybe you'll feel real anxious pulling it out of your wallet or purse or whatever it is. That's a sign that you may need to take some active role in changing your habits on that one. Draining your savings to pay for debt. You don't want to break into that nest egg that we always preach that you should have on there. Or finally, making bill payments late. If that's a standard thing for you, you can change it. Everything on here is changeable. That's what we're talking about. Just ways to step it up and be aware of ways to make the changes. But if any of those warning signs clicked for you, then definitely you're in the right place. Let's talk about some ways that we can jump in and change some of those habits. So the first thing we're going to talk about, and this next topic is my absolute favorite for anything financial. It should be a first step for any planning and should update with your life. So reevaluate it as often as you feel appropriate, whether you change jobs, whether you got a raise, anything that would affect a budget. We're talking about budget. That's the topic I'm going for here. That's my absolute favorite. Anything that would affect it, you want to stay on top of updating it, making the changes in there, just so you know where you are with your money and you have a plan for it. Otherwise, it's going to find a way to spend itself. That just always happens. So many people will use credit cards to make up the difference between what they spend and what they make. The best tool for getting out and staying out of debt is creating that budget. So the first step is to figure out what your current income and what your expenses are. You can use the worksheets found on pages 3, 4, and 5 of the handout, which, as Pete mentioned earlier, is on the GoToWebinar software under the handouts. You can download it completely free. Take a look at those pages whenever you have some free time, and that'll help you start a budget. There's plenty of other tools out there that you can use. I use Excel myself, but there's budgeting apps and whatnot as well. So it doesn't matter where you started as long as you start it. Some key things on there. It's important to avoid overestimating your income. If you work overtime hours, include extra income only if you're sure it will continue. It's always best to use conservative figures. Only include bonuses if they're guaranteed. If you're self-employed or your income fluctuates because of commissions or seasonal work, you may want to use the previous year's income as a base and estimate whether you think you'll be earning a little bit more or a little bit less. Again, be conservative. It's always better to have money left over than to be caught not being able to meet your expenses. Now, all of that, it definitely can be time consuming to analyze all of your expenses, but it is very important to be as accurate as possible. Taking the time to write down all of your purchases for at least a month can help you come up with some accurate figures. This is the part where you'll notice all of the little $5 to $10 monthly subscriptions you're paying for. I'm definitely looking at Netflix, Hulu, Pandora, Spotify when I'm talking about that. I went through my budget lately, and I have Hulu, Netflix, and Disney Plus for the kids, and it surprised me just how much that'll add up so quickly. So look out for those, definitely. To calculate a per month amount for expenses that do vary each month, such as food, clothing, stuff like that, just total them all up for the previous year, divide it by 12. That'll give you a nice estimate per month of what those extra expenses are. But definitely do not forget about savings. Not only do you want to save for specific goals like retirement, but it's a good idea, as I was talking about a little bit earlier, to have and establish an emergency savings fund. Life is definitely unexpected, and having 3 to 6 months worth of basic living expenses set aside in a nest egg can enable you to bounce back from a crisis without having to rely heavily on credit cards. You definitely don't want to run up the debt. That's never fun. So set a target date for having this safety net in place, and then factor the monthly amount that you would need to put into your savings into your budget, just so it's all set on there. And that just always comes back to the golden rule, which is pay yourself first. When you get paid, when that money hits your bank account, pay yourself. Pay to that nest egg. Pay to whatever retirement you've got going on there. If you have additional outside of your work, anything like that, it doesn't hurt to pay yourself first. I believe we are the most important people in our own life. So let's take care of ourselves on that. You also want to remember to list your debt, all of it. If you're unsure of what debt you have on there, make a call to those creditors and get the up-to-date information. Again, we want to be as accurate as we can on our budget so that we can make the best plan of how to achieve the goals we're going, whether that's paying off the debt, setting aside that nest egg, or just, something as fun as saving some extra money for a vacation. The more accurate we are on our budget, the better we can adjust. After you've listed everything, go ahead and subtract those expenses and debt payments from your income. That's going to show you what you got left over on there. If the result is positive, great. You're on the right track. You're doing things well. You can always make some changes if you're trying to improve that even further. If it's negative, however, you will need to take some action and either increase the income that you're bringing in or decrease the expenses that you're putting out there. Now, of course, the first option can be quite a bit difficult, but the second option can be surprising when you cut out some of those unnecessary expenses. Again, going back to like the Netflix, the Spotify, the Hulu, that extra coffee that we get every day going into work, anything like that, you'd be surprised on what you're paying that isn't an absolute necessity, and you can save quite a bit off of that. So some possible ways to increase income include working some overtime if it's available, getting a part-time job if you can fit it in there, or a better paying job, absolutely. If you can find one, that's always a great option. If you do have some family members that are working, they're young into it, and they have the ability, they can throw some money towards expenses, and that always helps out. Again, a budget is personal. It goes off of what your lifestyle is and what you have going on in your life. So just adjust it to what fits you. Find those opportunities to bring in some extra cash if you can. If you have assets, you can sell them. That's an option, but that's only a one-time solution. Once you sell them, they're gone. So if you're doing it to pay off debt, great, but it's not really a long-term way to close an ongoing budgetary deficit. So if you do sell some things, you pay off that debt, great. Then you have to stick to your budget to not run that debt up again. Increasing income, as I said, is not always practical, but most of us have some expenses, as I said on there, that we can reduce or eliminate. Just, think about it, be as honest as you can with yourself. Is there anything that you're currently spending money on that you can reduce, maybe substitute to something a little bit cheaper, postpone it, or just completely forego? Maybe, you need to skip out on your yearly vacation trip with the family just to pay off some debt. If that's the best solution, you got to do what you got to do on there. So I would love to see what people feel is a necessity. So if you have some ideas, feel free to type those into the chat. They come straight to me. I'll just look through some of those while I'm getting the next slide set up on there. So I'll give you guys a couple seconds while I click over. If you do have some ideas, I just like to see what some people feel is a necessity versus just a want on there. And then we're going to talk about controlling those spending urges. Okay, so in order for your budget to be helpful, obviously you need to follow it. It's not going to do anything to write up a budget and then just toss it to the side and not look at it. Now, that definitely can be easier said than done when you are standing in front of something shiny, brand new in a store that you really want. But I'm going to give you some tips on how to control those spending urges and perhaps prevent the overuse of that magical plastic card that's in all of our pockets. So when you're in a place where you're worried you're going to overspend, maybe you're going to Best Buy and you love electronics, just leave that debit card or credit card at home if you can. Bring the cash that you need for the one item that you're coming for. Leave it in your car if you need to. You can't spend more cash than you have in hand without having those plastic magical cards in your pocket on there. If you know a way to take a $5 bill, put it in your pocket, and pull out 10. Email me after this. I need to know that as well. So that would be great. But that's not, it just doesn't happen. So if you leave it at home, you can't spend more than the cash you have in your pocket. Avoid shopping as a social activity. I know that's not too hard to do right now with everyone kind of still shut in home, working remote, stuff like that. But it's a great tip for life. We're not going to be in this situation forever, I hope. So it's easy to get sucked up in the excitement when you're out with a friend to just want to buy stuff or eat out a lot, anything like that. Try to avoid that until you get, in a comfortable position. For each potential purchase, ask yourself if the item is essential. If it's not, just wait a day or two and see if you still really want it. So, that comes down to my next tip, which is allow yourself to have small, affordable rewards for sticking to your budget. Budgeting is like a diet. If you don't leave room for any indulgences, it can be really hard to stick with. But if you know you want something a little bit larger, like a TV for Black Friday, just squeeze that into your budget. You're going to go spend $300 or $400, divide that by how many months until that date, and then set aside that $30, $40 a month on there. Then it's not really a hit. You're not putting it on debt, and you budgeted it in, and it feels great. So my biggest tip that saved me definitely hundreds, probably thousands at this point, I removed my credit card from Amazon. I found myself always going on there. There was a daily deal. I'm like, I might use this down the road. Consumerism definitely hit me on that one. I'd order stuff and I didn't need it. So when I took out my credit card, by the time that I went and grabbed my wallet, started punching it back in, it already clicked in my head that I didn't need these items, and then I deleted them from my cart. So that was my biggest tip. If it helps you, great. If not, that's what worked for me. So if all else fails, cancel your credit card. Having and using credit responsibly is essential to having a good credit score. It definitely is beneficial if you can, but if you're unable to control your credit usage, it's definitely better to close the cards, take a little hit to your score, than to run up that debt and let that affect you in every way that it does. Because having debt, struggling with debt, it's not only just miserable, it hurts. It hurts people. It's tough. It's tough. But again, and I want to stress this, any debt can be manageable. It's just going to take time. We're going to keep talking about some other ways to clean it up, but just know that it can be done. So let's look at deleting that debt. So we already talked about creating a budget, which can help you avoid getting into the debt in the future. but we need to talk about the debt that you may have right now. There's two basic methods of accelerating debt repayment. One is to increase your payments. Minimum payments are often set very low, so it could be years before you're debt-free, if that is even possible at all. If all you're making is the minimum payments, interest can definitely keep you behind on that. If you have multiple accounts, you will save more money by being systematic and focusing your extra payments on one creditor at a time instead of spending a little extra on all of them. Many people like to start with the debt with the lowest balance because it will be paid off the soonest and you get that good feeling of seeing one debt gone. My biggest tip for that is, if you do that and you pay off the smallest one, great. Don't, the next month, even though that smallest debt is paid off, take what you would have paid to that smallest debt and roll it on to the next one. I call it the snowball method. And then because you're already used to spending that every month, when you move that payment to the next one, that's going to accelerate that and so on and so forth. And eventually, that snowball is going to start off small, but it's going to get real big, and that debt's going to get eaten up as you're paying it off faster and faster. Of course, if you don't get that burst of a good feeling by having it paid off the lowest one and getting it out of there, it's always a good idea to pay the highest interest one first. You're going to save the most money that way. But again, it's just whatever motivates you. For me, seeing one paid off would be great, and then that would motivate me to keep paying off the rest. But whatever works best for you. Again, everything financial is very personal, and you know yourself better than I do. So I'm just giving you the tips, and you use the ones that work out best for you. So as far as that, the other method is to lower your interest rate. There's several ways that you may be able to get lower interest rates. So I'm going to go through a few of those for you. You can ask the creditors. You can ask the creditors directly if they can lower your interest rate. That's real hit or miss. I've seen it happen, so I'm not going to say it doesn't, but you won't know unless you call and ask. So that's definitely an option. You can transfer your balances to a card with a lower interest rate. If you're going to do that, definitely keep an eye out for a 0% transfer fee special. A lot of cards will run that every once in a while. We've ran it a couple times at First Northern Credit Union. Just keep an eye out for that. That means you can bring your balance over and you're not getting a percentage of that balance added to it to bring it all into one spot. And then you can also get the lower interest rate on the newer card. Next option would be getting a consolidation loan. There's many options out there for that. Find the best one that works for you if that's the one that you want to go for. Paying off existing debt with a home equity line of credit, a loan from the home equity loan, cash out refinance. Those are all an option. It is very important to keep in mind that with that option, you are increasing your mortgage payment. So if you were to miss those, any issues on that, it can be bad. So just, talk to your financial service advisor. We can put you in touch with one here at First Northern Credit Union if you need help talking about it, seeing what the options are for that, what equity is in your house, and so on and so forth. But that can definitely be a great option if it's used properly. You can participate in a debt management plan in which the creditors often lower your interest rate in exchange for you to go through a counseling with them and then closing out your account. So that's always something to look at. If you are thinking about the balance transfer, a consolidation loan or home equity line of credit or any of those options, do remember that you are using debt to pay off debt. So if you start using and carrying a balance on those cards that you just cleaned off to consolidate, you're actually increasing your level of debt, not decreasing it, which can be a very slippery slope. So if you're going to consolidate all the loans into one, so you're making one payment on all of your debt, you need to either lock up those credit cards, cut them up if that feels best for you, but just put them to the side so you're not running them back up once you clear it off. As I said on there, we do offer nearly all of the options that I just talked about at First Northern Credit Union. If you did want to speak to a financial service advisor, feel free to email myself or Pete, and we can put you in touch, and we can even go over most of the options for you before you even talk to them. So keep that in mind. But since we're talking about deleting your debt, we're talking about credit, let's go ahead and take a look at improving your credit standing. So this is very helpful even if you're not in any kind of debt crisis, just to be aware of your credit standing, knowing how to look at your reports, everything like that. So first off, all of your credit activity is tracked by your credit report, which is compiled by 3 credit bureaus. We're talking about Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. For each credit account that you have, your report is going to show who it's with, your payment history, the initial amount borrowed or credit limit, the current amount owed, and when it was opened. Now, your credit report is also going to show if you have experienced any credit-related legal actions, such as a judgment, foreclosure, bankruptcy, repossession. Any of that is going to show up on there as well as who has pulled your report. So be aware of that, and this is stuff that you can look at as well. So before I move on to the next part on that, I'm going to ask Pete if he will type a site that I love into the chat box for you. This site allows you to pull once per year per bureau. So there's 3 bureaus. So you can pull 3 reports per year, completely free. Completely free. You can look through it. You can check it out, see if there's any errors, get those errors corrected. That's going to lift your score immediately. But it's also going to show you what anyone that you're applying for credit through is also going to see. So the more you know, the better you can go in prepared and get those better interest rates and everything. So Pete's going to type that into the chat for you. Definitely click through, check it out. I always recommend, since you get 3 reports, you get one from Equifax, one from Experian, one from TransUnion. Until you're in a comfortable position, go ahead and stagger when you pull those. So, you know, kind of in the first 4 months, pull one, second 4 months, pull another, and so on and so forth. That way you kind of see as it's updating what's going on there. Okay, your credit score, that's a numeric summary of the information in your credit report and is designed to predict the likelihood that you will repay what you borrow. The most commonly used scoring model is the FICO score, which ranges from at the lowest 300 to a perfect 850, with a higher score being indicative of less risk. Generally, those with a higher score are more easily granted credit and get a better interest rate. So now that we've introduced what the FICO score does, what it is, what it's made up for, let's dive into it and break it down for you. So we're going to look at that biggest chunk of the pie there, that 35%. That's your payment history. Making your payments on time boosts your score. Conversely, if you make a late payment, your score will take a hit. The more recent, frequent, and severe the lateness, the lower your score is going to be on that. Collection accounts and legal actions have a serious negative impact. So, you know, there's that. When we're talking about payment history, that's where we go back to where I was talking about minimum payments on cards. And it's troublesome to just make the minimum payment. However, if that's all you can make and it keeps you from having late payments, you know, do that. It's going to help your score the best that it can on there. So keep that in mind. The next biggest chunk, we're going to look at that 30%. That's the amounts owed. So carrying large balances on personal loans and revolving debt like credit cards, particularly those balances that are close to the credit limit, is going to lower your score. So if you're using all of the credit that you have available to you, that can hurt your score, most definitely. Next, we're going to look at that little 15% there, and that's your length of credit history. So the longer you've had your accounts, the better. So that's only going to go up as years go by and you keep those credits open. So on that section, I always like to mention, if you have a card that you got when you were much younger, you may not use it anymore because it doesn't have the best rewards for you. What myself, and I know Pete does this as well, is we will have one monthly recurring bill put onto it, such as Netflix. I have my Toll Pass hooked up to my oldest card, and then that way it keeps it open, but as soon as it gets charged, I immediately go on and pay it because you don't have to keep a balance going to help your credit. I know that's a misconception that some people believe, but you don't. Just using the card and then paying it off immediately is good as well. I know I'll do that as well, talking about Black Friday, stuff like that. If I budgeted out for an electronic, I'll put it on my rewards card. I get the rewards points. I go home, I immediately pay it. Then I don't have to worry about that credit card either. So just some little tips and tricks on that one. Okay, let's look at those two 10% there. First one, new credit. So this factor looks at the number and proportion of recently opened accounts and the number of inquiries. If you're not aware when you're car shopping, the more places you check for the best rate, it actually all gets lumped together as one. So it won't count as multiple inquiries on that. So feel free to shop around, get the best rate that you can. You don't always have to go with whatever's offered at the dealership. So keep that in mind. The final 10%, we're looking at types of credit used. So having a variety of accounts, such as a credit card, retail account, home loan, different loans, that boosts your score as well, 10%. So wow, that's going to bring us to our final slide. So let's go ahead and talk about improving that credit standing. That went quick. I'm loving it. Let's see. So if your score is less than stellar due to getting into debt, like I said, it's not. Don't despair. It's not. It is a big deal, but it's not something that can't be changed. So by practicing good credit habits, you can definitely raise that score over time. As I said earlier, it's all going to depend on time and staying as committed to it as you can. Again, always pay on time. Your payment history was that largest chunk of your credit score, so making those payments on time is extremely important. The second chunk we talked about was your debt load. You can reduce that, absolutely. That's going to help you out. Even if you've never missed a payment, having that large debt load will lower your score. So commit to repaying your debt as soon as possible. And in the future, with that budgeting tips and everything we've gone over, try not to charge as much as you can, or possibly paying it off, as I said, in full after you make the purchase. The next tip is talking about checking your credit report for errors. So as I said, there's that site that Pete put into the chat box right there for you. Pull it. If you've never pulled it, pull them. It's not the credit bureau's job to look for errors on there. Not a lot of people are aware that they need to go in and check it, find those errors, and then contact them to get the errors fixed, resolved. And that's going to instantly shoot your score up on there. So definitely, if you notice any errors, send a dispute letter to the relevant credit bureaus. Next, it's going to talk about keeping your old accounts. We've already talked about that a bit. If you have a credit card that you've had forever and you just want to throw one monthly thing, whether it's your music, Spotify, Pandora, Tidal, whatever you use, Netflix, whatever. If you have just one thing that you always do, or if you just want to use that one as your gas credit card and you pay it off every week, just make sure that if you're using it just to keep it open, pay it off. If you don't need to carry a revolving balance, don't. It doesn't help you in any way to carry that balance. So I know we talked about doing some balance transfers to consolidate and whatnot, but limit that, because while transferring balances to the teaser rate can be a way to efficiently get out of debt, it can also have a detriment on number of inquiries, number of open credit lines. That's going to hurt your score a little bit as well. Avoid the excess credit applications. Every time you apply for credit, that shows as inquiries, and that's going to have the ability to hurt your score as well. Again, just be patient. It may feel like credit mistakes can haunt you forever, but your payment history from the past 2 years is much more important than what happened before that. And most negative information is removed from your report after 7 years. So 7 years may seem like a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that bad. So all you can do is focus on bettering your habits in the future, and then learn from the mistakes of what you did in the past, if you made any. So again, regardless of what your financial situation looks like now, just remember that with dedication to budgeting and making those wise credit management choices, you can be debt-free, have a good credit score, and achieve whatever other financial goals that you put into your budget. You just got to stick to it. It's doable. It takes time. As you see it happening, it becomes easier, just like a diet, just like working out. It's rough at the beginning. You got to put in that extra work at the beginning, but once it becomes a habit and you're used to doing it, it's amazing how well it works. So that is actually going to conclude this webinar. I'm going to pass it to Pete, see if we had any great questions on there. If you have any more questions, feel free to type it into the chat. It comes directly to us privately. We'll answer it to the best of our ability. Pete?
No extra. There were a couple questions, general questions, and you anticipated those questions, Zachary, in your presentation. Good job. So I did answer a couple of them, but you answered them as well. So I'm just going to give 2 more seconds for any other last second questions that come in, and it looks like we're all good. Awesome, great presentation. And so with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We will follow up with an email. I will do that today with a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that Zachary just presented in a PDF form. And please email any questions that you have. I will let Zachary have the final word, but I just want to wish everybody the best of health, wealth, and positivity. And thank you, and have a great weekend. Zachary.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Pete. I just want to reiterate what Pete said. The first step is definitely looking to get the help, find the information that you didn't have. Just showing up today and listening to the webinar, congratulations. That's the first step if you needed it. Next, go out and make that budget. Take a look at everything. That's great. Even if you already knew all this information, again, thank you for showing up, getting that refresher. If it's new information that helped you, even better. Pete and I and all of First Northern Credit Union, we're always here to help any questions and help you in any way that we can financially. So don't be shy, don't be afraid to reach out to us. If you are a member, great. If you're not, join us. Go ahead and become a member and take advantage of anything that we can help you with. But whether you're a member or not, feel free to reach out to Pete and myself, and we will help you with any other questions. As Pete said earlier, 2020 was a rough year for a lot of people, but 2021 is going to be better, especially if we're taking an active role in making sure that it is. So with that, as Pete said, I want to wish you all the best as well, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the weekend. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.